Welcome back to Let's Have It Out. Nolo, let's continue with you. So let's talk about the investment environment a little bit. Nowadays, when we talk about investment in agriculture, we almost always hear about land and about policy uncertainty. But when we look at the data, we see that investment in agriculture has been on a downward trend for years, probably since the early 2000s, long before this land expropriation debate.
Correct.
So clearly something is structurally wrong with the policy environment or with the investment environment. What is happening? Is it perhaps that investors, as we've heard often in the popular narrative, are on an investment strike, that they are sitting on capital and refusing to deploy it? What is going on?
Well, Thabi, I think one needs to look at it without looking at in the pragmatic view, right? In a sense that traditionally, who's investing in agriculture? That is critical for one to first assess. In our current South African landscape, your current commercial farmers tend to be the guys who are investing as they're currently producing majority of the production that's coming out of the agricultural value chain. So if a farmer does not reinvest, he's not growing. So if one needs to look at what are the key drivers, what are we looking at as the key indicators that we're not investing back in agriculture? Because the numbers say the other way around from what I can interpret, that the demand shifted for agricultural output. Therefore, if the demand for agricultural output, meaning what the consumers are eating or consuming, and the supply is there to meet that, it means that somehow there is investment happening in some form of ways. So one needs to look at potentially farmers are diversifying, or the consumers eating things which are consuming different produce, and therefore, from my view, would be that there is that the stats are showing the other way around versus what we're hearing as rhetoric about lack of investment in agriculture.
But would you say that as investors you are constrained by the policy environment, or what else is at play? So we've seen that investment is on a downward trend. So that is a fact. So what is happening?
For me, I would say, when you say downward trend, so what are you utilizing as, let's say, a measure of a downward trend?
For instance, gross fixed capital formation, which is basically an indicator of new infrastructure in the agricultural sector. That has been down as a percentage of GDP and in absolute terms.
Correct.
So, we can see that investment is a problem. So, and I'm just trying to understand why it is that investors are not coming to the party.
And I think we always need to look at agriculture, always these cycles in periods of time, and what was happening, let's say, in 2000s. In the 2000s, it was the boom of what we call the start of the mega farmer in this country. And therefore, traditionally, these farmers started growing and growing. And subsequent to that, what you saw is that those businesses will somehow plateau and become almost, let's say, they stop growing, right? Because either there's succession planning, meaning the family is not from generation to generation, and now they're just producing at almost a stable level, and therefore not reinvesting. So that could potentially be one of the indicators. But I still feel personally that we're seeing consistently the growth in population. We're seeing we're not a massive importer of our consumer. Are we short of oranges? Are we short of the things that we're eating in this country? And therefore, it's counter to what the stats are saying. So therefore, I think when you're trying to look at the stats, one needs to examine the detail of what those stats mean. So maybe, as I'm saying, the tractors are not a good indicator anymore that we're all buying tractors, because maybe we're actually moving towards certain things which don't require tractors in a way.
Thank you, Nola. Well, let's hear from one of our viewers. A question on WhatsApp comes from Sello, a farmer in the Free State, and he asks, why is the department still giving black farmers support via white intermediaries who ask exorbitant fees for cultivation, resulting in only 60% of the funds reaching the farmer? The next thing, Sello says, that help comes in December when the planting season has passed. Thank you, Sello, for your comment. I think, DG, you're probably best placed to respond to that.
I think it's a very important question that comes there. One of the absentee variables has been the regulatory environment on those grants, wherein you will find that when we have got, for example, the Comprehensive Producer Support Program grant called CASP, we will disperse it to provinces without regulating it. So in August of 2018, our minister, Honorable Senzeni Zogwana, came up with the National Producer Support Program, which is a draft program which seeks to regulate how we support smallholder black farmers, inclusive the disbursement of funds. And to that effect, therefore, funds will directly go to farmers at the right time for the right inputs. Correct. For example, the president was very clear during the during the rainy season, we must be ready. And he said it long before. So clearly we needed to align ourselves to that in our planning. So the comprehensive producer support policy regulates, one, the categories of farmers. Secondly, the registration of farmers. Yes. We actually now are going to have, just launched a register of South African farmers. We no longer are going to think we've got farmers. Any farmer we give support to is going to get into an electronic register, and it becomes one of our database. Then it talks to my colleague. When you talk about demand and consumption patterns, they are going to be aligned to production patterns. Correct. That are based on the support we give to our farmers. So to that effect, therefore, we will be able to understand the impact of our support programs. Yes. Which is what we have not been doing. And I think that answers that question.
DG, I think those are quite ambitious changes to the regulatory environment, and those of us in industry will be keeping a very close eye on that. But let's take a caller. We have Ali from Brakpan on the line. Hi, Ali. What is your question or comment?
A very quick one to the DG. Some of the emerging farmers like myself, we are now forced to do farming on part-time basis because we've got families to support. You do farming and you must still work for someone so that the cash flow is sustained in a family. But I just want to ask the DG, him or any other person, to come and have a look at what we're trying to do under difficult circumstances. More than funds, we also need land. Maybe some other farmers do receive a lot of support. We have knocked at all the doors, but in spite of all the challenges, we're still trying to keep our head above the water. We are plowing in Mpumalanga. Okay, please, I'll leave my contact details with your producer. I just want to ask him to come and have a look under the circumstances we are trying to farm.
Thanks, Ali. I think, Ali's question is quite relevant, and I think his concerns are shared by quite a large number of small-scale farmers, where we see that there is a serious resource shortage, and they feel that they're not getting enough support. And which is why I actually started this conversation by saying we've seen funding to this component within your department reducing, and where we see that this need has been increasing, that's quite worrying, DG.
Yes. I think it's a very valid question. I think let me just first admit that we have got resource constraints. So it is important that we profile who is a farmer. Because not everyone who needs land will get land, because land can be up to a point. But our starting point then is to look at government land or government farms, which have already been leased to black smallholder farmers. Government has now agreed that will give long-term leases of 30 years. With the option for those farmers who have become commercial to purchase or get title deeds so that they can get collaterals to become efficient producers of food. First for food security, then for agro-processing. Because at the end of the day, we would like them to contribute to the commercialization of agriculture in South Africa, thereby increasing the cake. The cake had to increase, thereby impacting on our economic growth. So one of the things now that we're embarking on is to make sure that the current farmers, which has not been there, must get the right to title deeds, so that they have got security of tenure, and they can produce with confidence. And that makes them confident. The second one, or concurrent with that, is how much land is available that we can help the gentleman. We can help people like the gentleman who said, we want to farm, we've got small land. That's why we came up with what we call the agrarian revolution. It talks to commercialization, if you will, of communal lands, making communal lands and communities more productive by government support.
Thank you, DG. We'll come back to a little bit of that after the break, but for now, we'll take more of your questions after the break. Don't go away.